There is a guy who almost discovered the very sought-after famous Northwest Passage, but he saw some probably clouds and was like, nope, mountain, can't sail through, have to turn around. Hi, my name is Dina Mahendl. I'm a doctoral researcher at Leipzig University and I make videos about Arctic science and history, especially focusing on clouds and snow. Today I want to dive into the history of Arctic exploration again and share what's probably my favorite story of an Arctic explorer or Arctic expedition. The, let's say, quote-unquote protagonist of this story, John Ross, single-handedly slowed down progress in Arctic exploration by more or less inventing a mountain range that he claimed could not be sailed through. He was so close to discovering the entrance to the famous Northwest Passage, so a passage linking the Atlantic and the Pacific via the Arctic. This was highly sought after as a new trading route. The British government even established a prize money at that time, so I think £20,000 were for grabs, which, accounting for inflation, is like £2 million nowadays. And John Ross just simply could not find it because he claimed there were mountains where there were none, and so he just turned around. And he was ridiculed for that soon after. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I want to start with a couple of disclaimers. So when I'm talking about Arctic exploration, I am talking in the context of predominantly Western men exploring the Arctic in the search for trading routes in the 17th, 18th, 19th century. Of course, we must not forget that the Arctic has been home to indigenous populations for thousands of years. So please take it with a grain of salt when I use words like explore and discover. Also, what I'm talking about here are actual historic facts, so these are true stories, but I'm aiming for a mixture between education and entertainment, so just keep that in mind. Alright, but I think that's been enough disclaimers and we can start at the beginning. John Ross was a Scottish polar explorer and Royal Navy officer, and he was born in 1777. In 1818, he was put in charge of a mission with the aim to find an answer to the question whether a Northwest Passage even exists. So the goal was to go around the northeast coast of America, so the far northeast coast, and sail into the Bering Strait. On the way, he was also to collect notes on tides, on the ice, currents, and collect some specimens. Ross and his crew set out in April 1880 on two ships, Isabella and Alexander, with Ross being in charge of the larger Isabella, which kind of sounds weird out of context. I think it's a bit weird naming ships after people, so I prefer the when it's a battleship called Terror or something. Throw back to the last video. Anyway, according to a biography of Ross, having rounded the northeastern point of the North American continent, he was to steer straight for Bering Strait, enter the Pacific, hand over a copy of his journals to the Russian governor of Kamchatka for dispatch to London, and proceed to Hawaii for replenishment and recreation. An enticing prospect. Enticing indeed. Sounds a bit like dude was like, oh yeah, quick trip to the North Pole and back, hand over some letters and then a nice long vacation in Hawaii. Easy peasy. But Ross and crew soon found out that navigating the icy waters was easier said than done. In early June, they were trapped by what Ross claims were at least 700 icebergs. I mean, you're sure, guy, but okay. But he kept himself busy by collecting specimens of starfish, mud and worms. Fun. In the middle of August, they finally reached Baffin Bay and then further navigated into Lancaster Sound, which we now know as the entrance to the Northwest Passage. There, Ross saw what he thought were mountains or a mountain range blocking the way. Nowadays, we're not sure what Ross really saw. Some claim it was a Fata Morgana. I also heard stories of him just simply seeing clouds, which intrigued me a lot, but we don't really know. In any way, he felt confident enough to assign names to the individual peaks and bays, and even called the whole mountain range Crocus Mountains, after the first secretary of the Admiralty. That was John Wilson Croker. I'm sure he was real happy with the name. He then ordered his ships to turn around, which even some of his crewmates were not really happy with. One of them wrote at the time, "It was quite impossible to say what openings there might not be." Sounds a bit shady. And further, even better, "To describe our mortification and disappointment would be impossible, and thus having our increasing hopes annihilated in a moment without a shadow of a reason appearing." I love old-timey writing. William Perry, so the guy in charge of the ship Alexander, wrote to his family, "I know it is in existence," so about that passage, "and not very hard to find." And he was not just a talker, he actually went back a year later and sailed straight through what Ross claimed to have been mountains. So he actually found the entrance to the Northwest Passage, and it was named after him, the Parry Channel. Come on, Ross, it could have been the Ross Channel. So close, so close. But Guy wanted to have some vacation, and sooner than later. Back home, Ross had to endure quite some ridicule. So a popular magazine at that time wrote a review, 49-page review of his journey, making basically fun of everything that Ross had written before in a kind of sarcastic tone. It was published anonymously, but most likely written by the second secretary of the Royal British Admiralty, John Barrow. Well, seems like Ross should have called his fake mountains Barrow Mountains. Probably encouraged by this article, more and more of his former crewmates published criticism of Ross, to which he responded that they must have been conspiring against him from the start, a statement that he redacted the very next day. There were also multiple caricatures made of Ross. I hope I found one. For some reason, and I can't really imagine why, Ross never sailed for the British Admiralty again. He did, however, lead another 2 privately funded expeditions to the Arctic, which even redeemed him in the eye of the public. During the first of these 2 later voyages in 1830, he set out together with his nephew, and they, or I think it was even the nephew, discovered 3 new islands in the Canadian Arctic. They called them Beaufort Islands after the Admiralty's hydrographer. However, when William IV, formerly Duke of Clarence, was crowned king, Ross made up his mind and renamed the islands Clarence Islands. He even went a step further and added 6 more additional islands on the map, so just drew them in there so that there were enough to name each one after a family member of the king. Beaufort, by the way, was not too happy, and he said to Lady Franklin, "Ross thought it would be as well to make a few more so that they, and the royal family is meant, might have one apiece." You remember Lady Franklin from last video? She was a pretty prominent figure. Oh, and naming fake landmasses after some important people paid off this time. So Ross was knighted a year later. So I guess the lesson that we learn is if you invent some fake landmasses, name them after the right people. Anyhow, I think I'll end the video here. I just think it's such a fun story to have it like there is a guy who almost discovered the very sought after famous Northwest Passage, but he saw some probably clouds and was like, nope, mountain, can't sail through, have to turn around. So I hope you also got some enjoyment out of this story. I hope you had a good 2023, and if not, it's almost over. At least that's maybe something. Hope you're doing well. Stay safe, stay healthy, have a great rest of the week and a great 2024. See you then again, and leave me a like, a comment, maybe you have a question or a video suggestion. I'm always very happy to take those. Subscribe if you want, and see you soon. Bye bye! And if you heard a bunch of noise in the background, that's thanks to this lovely lady and her sister, who were kindly playing while Mama was filming a video. Oops, sorry baby. Bye.
Admiralty.